You're on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of Houston right here at UHN-TV with myself, Dr. Clara Brent, and Dr. Bobby Mills as the co-host. We are so happy to have you in our midst and want to remind you also that we have a free app. So go to it and you can see everything UHN has to offer. Bobby, we want to thank you for coming today and helping me out with the show. We want to talk about politicians and how they are not doing what they ought to do in regards to our finances that is being raised by our taxpayers, given by our taxpayers, and all the government has sent in for those who have had hardships with their homes and losing their jobs and all of those things that are happening. Our school district, Houston Independent School District, is going through quite a bit because of the I guess Satan, I guess you could call it Satan, that got into the hearts and minds of those that were supposed to be representing the parents of our children, and it seemed to have happened that they received kickbacks and all types of construction deals that they should not have made in regards to their own selfish gains. How do you look at that from the standpoint of a
Well, unfortunately, HISD, when it was majority controlled, you had issues of young folk who are minority, blacks and browns, obtaining a quality education. And now in the 21st century, you have minority professionals and people who are trustees overseeing HISD. And the more things change, the more they remain the same. So nothing has basically changed in HISD.
What you mean? Beforehand, seemed like HISD was doing okay.
Well, what I'm saying is, in the past,
it was happening. What has
Billy Reagan was the superintendent, and
mm-hmm.
the professionals by and large who control the educational development of our children, they were, majority white, and the people who were on the board of trustees, they were. But now it's different. You have blacks who are the superintendent.
Yes, and
you have blacks and Hispanics who are trustees. The board of trustees, and you have the same level of dysfunction and corruption occurring.
Now, the only issue is that when the whites were in position, there was not a lot of corruption shown or found out, but now it has been. Is it because the whites were smarter, or the blacks were just too loose on there?
They were probably more sophisticated.
Sophisticated, okay.
With
that's a good
the
word.
way they handled the corruption and dealt with the corruption.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're just openly blatant with it, where you have
hog wild.
Yeah, where you have people who are trustees, and they get involved in contractual kickbacks schemes. You have professionals who oversee the finances of the district. They go and buy multi-million-dollar homes out in the woodlands and driving Bentleys and all that kind of stuff and so forth. And then when they get caught, they want to play the race card. And then you have...
What's the race card?
Well, the race card is they're coming after me because I'm black.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's not because I violated the law. See, the law is the law, and crime is crime.
So it is.
And it doesn't make any difference.
What color you are.
What color you are. And unfortunately, we do know that sometimes in the criminal justice system, things do not always pan out in a just fashion. But
True.
that still does not negate the fact that you ran for the school board because you told parents and community people you desire to oversee the education and development of children and to ensure
in
that
their
they
place.
got, yeah, right.
In the parents' place. That's what they
Right.
were supposed to be doing.
And you wanted to ensure that children got a quality education.
Mm-hmm.
But your motivation was to become wealthy or to secure economic advantage and principle and pleasure
It's a
and all
shame.
of that
It's really a
for
shame.
yourself.
Yeah.
And then when you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, some of them not only put their hand in the cookie jar, but they take the cookie jar home. You know,
Put their arms on everything and carry it home with them.
yeah,
too.
carry it home, you know,
Yeah.
and then you want to come back and play the race card and say, well, you know, they're coming after me because I'm black, and we know that that's not the case, and those of us who have a God conscience, we need to start, you know, really holding people accountable and saying, you know, crime is crime, and when you break the law,
You get punished for it.
you pay the price.
Yeah,
you
you
do the
get
crime,
punished.
you pay the price.
Exactly.
And
But what we're going to what can we possibly do? Will they get the money back from those people, or supposing they spend it all? Do they have to sell their homes and
well, you
car
know, they'll probably
and replace that money?
You know, place attachments on their property, their homes, or whatever they own, and so forth, in order to recoup the resources. But what it is it's a sad commentary.
It's no matter. Let me bring this up too. It's no matter how much if it was a small amount or if it was a large amount, it's still stealing. It's still being corrupted in your mind and hearts, and whatever you do, it's wrong. If it's a little bit or a lot, it's not yours to take. That's what I want to bring into the picture. That if you said I just took out $10 was not yours, so you don't.
Well, it's not about the $10.
It's not $10. It's you taking it.
The
That's the
$10
whole
was
thing.
not yours.
Yeah, it's not
It's
yours.
not yours to take.
Exactly, and as far as the city of Houston is concerned too, and I have appreciated Mayor Turner in many different ways, and how he has handled the mayorship, but he's also got the spotlight on him as well, and whomever were handling the negotiations and whatever for the people of Houston, especially the elderly people of Houston, when we had that big Harvey come in, and the majority of them haven't even gotten their homes taken care of or repaired, and the money been just there, and we want to know where the money is. And
well, the money is still there. It has not been spent.
And it needs to be spent. It needs to be given out and not set aside, and not used for your own selfish gain. That's where we are stuck in the middle of.
Well, the sad thing about it is we have to ask the question, how can the black community hold elected black officials accountable? Because it's our votes that put them in office, but usually it's not our campaign contributions
It's our
that
vote.
fuel
Yes.
the mother's milk, so to speak, of what politics is all about. And the reason why most people don't like politics is because, in the common vernacular sense, politics is a pile of, you know what, manure, you know, so to speak. And people,
I heard that.
yeah,
Yeah, it
9
is.
times
It's
out of 10,
that they go
don't
through.
want- yeah, don't want to have anything to do with politics and politicians because of
They are so easily persuaded to, even those that intentions were to do good. Once they get in there, they get discouraged because everybody else is corrupted, and they tend to go along with the corruption. And if you were intending to do such a thing, then it's time to not do it. We don't have, as Felton and we were all talking, and Felton brought up, we don't have enough God in our consciousness. We're not led by the God Spirit that He put in it.
Truth. We're not led by
put
the
into
Spirit of
us.
the truth.
We just cannot lose courage, even if you're in there working by yourself. If you're out for good and you're out for right, do the right thing if you're a politician. And we're looking at all these politicians from the government all the way down to the state, that it is so much corruption until no one wants to do what is right, what is good for the good of the country, and especially in the country is the people. What is good for the people of the country. And that is my heartfelt meaning, that God is not in place. God is not in place in these guys' hearts and minds. And those that do have God in their hearts and place, like our president, he has God in his heart. But the problem is, he has so many surrounding him that he doesn't. And talking different ways and actions with him until he's just slow in movement. And a lot of blacks are holding him responsible for what's going on with the rights of this country. The civil rights, I should say, even though they are about moved out of place, the civil rights is about moved out of place. But for voting rights, it ought to be some way possible that all this mess can be stopped. And we got to get behind the president and our vice president and make sure that this happens. Otherwise, we are going to be in a degradation of damnation and whatever else you could name.
Well, what has happened in our country is that people have never really gotten over the Civil War. See, you have people like
State of
federal
Texas.
judge
Yes.
in Alabama, Judge Roy Moore, who openly said that America was great when slavery existed.
He did say that.
So when you have a federal judge,
A mindset like that, yes.
who has that kind of mentality, and he then steps down from, a federal judgeship and runs for a Senate seat in
Isn't that
Alabama.
something? Isn't that something?
You have
And
you have
he
a
gets
serious
voted
problem
in.
because we have people who are still fighting,
Right.
the Civil War. So, when folk from the South say that the South should rise again, what they mean is that
Slavery
It
is
is
going to rise
never-
again. That's what they mean. You're going to be slaves. We're going to make y'all slaves again, whether you like it or not.
And it also
Economically.
means that, it has never been eradicated from their hearts of their minds.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there.
And when will they recognize that you lost? The South lost.
Well, the reason
rich
why they-
white man plantation owners, y'all lost, and
But the reason why they
Right.
don't feel the effects of the loss is because they never paid a penalty. See, when you lose a war
there ought to be
and
some-
then you don't suffer any consequences for succeeding from the Union and creating all this havoc, and so they never had to pay the reparations that was promised, the 40 acres and the mule.
yes,
They immediately after the Civil War started injecting into the system the black codes, and then they got the Ku Klux
Killings
Klan
and
and all
hangings.
of that to
Yeah,
help
lynchings.
enforce and reinforce, the old system. So that's what the problem is. The South has never
give 'em
paid
anything.
a price.
Yes.
And Lyndon Johnson said it most clearly and vividly in 1964 when he forced the Congress to pass the Civil Rights Bill. He said, we have lost the South, the Democratic Party, that is, because what these people have done is a switcheroo on us. See, the Southern Dixiecrats, now, they went into the Republican Party and took over the Republican Party. So the Southern Dixiecrats now are the Republicans. And
got us all fooled.
yeah,
They got a lot of people fooled. Well, I'm not fooled.
And the Democrats now are the Northern Republicans who were anti-slavery and who really fought against that system.
Do you think the evangelicals know that?
Oh yeah.
So that means that they're southern bound.
Well, see
southern
what they're
bound?
dealing with. You got to understand, Christian right evangelicals. They're dealing with one thing and one thing only: white privilege. White privilege, and they have turned Christianity in their churches, the tenets of Jesus Christ, into white privilege. That's why on Sunday morning,
you got a lot of separation more than what we think we have.
well, you look.
Well,
It has been historically said and validated that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in American society. So how is it that someone who claims to be a Christian, claims to be a follower of Jesus Christ, claim to know God, but yet will not abide by
God's rules and
the
regulations?
first
Yes.
and second commandments? Love God with all your heart and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So that's why when you go to a white church on Sunday morning, it's primarily whites, and the same thing with blacks. So how can we come together
If we
when
can't
we
come
say,
together. Well,
when we can't worship together?
we the worship
Because
together.
God is God, and He's no respecter of skin color or social status.
But when we look at the fact that I prefer being with my own kind.
Well,
and
the
I'm
thing about it
questioning, but
is, it's not
I
so
don't
much
pref-
of being with your own kind and all of that,
My own
because
race
your
of
own
people.
kind should be those who love the Lord.
I'm speaking of the race of people.
I understand
Yeah,
what
you know
you're
what I'm
saying.
saying. I would prefer being with my race of people because we worship different. We worship God differently. We
Well, it's
we
not-
sing
see, it should
different.
never-
We shout different. We pray differently. All of that is involved in that. But the segregation part is that it's not the segregation of the mind. That's what I'm speaking of. That's what I'm going after, and I know that's what you are too.
But what I'm saying, Dr. Brent,
What?
it should never be about worship style. It should never be about style. It should be about the principles of God as expressed in the life and teachings of Jesus Christ.
But can you do that
See,
separately?
what you talking about?
But you can't do that separately.
Well, but see, what you're talking about is worship style.
Yeah.
And so, it shouldn't be about worship style. It should be about the principles and teachings of Jesus Christ.
So when
And
you
so
say
it doesn't make any difference who you worship with or the style of worship. It's whether or not the principles and teachings of Jesus Christ are being taught an example
but when
by
you say
leaders and followers in a given church. And that's not what's taking place.
But look, when you say that segregation, when you speak of the word segregation means that you want to be separate from me and I want to be separate from you. That's what you're pointing out in the church as a whole. We all know that we have different denominations, evangelicals, Baptists, blah blah blah. I could name a quite Catholics. You can name a lot, but the whole issue is that how we're going to teach or preach right in the way we worship. That's the issue. Can we get the mindset right? The mindset of God in us. The mindset. Not necessarily having to worship, but not necessarily having to worship together.
Well, you contradicting yourself.
Then how is that?
Because if you talking about having the mind of God,
exactly.
God has no respecter of human personality.
That's true, but you said segregated. You said that the churches are segregated.
Well,
because
we all know that the most segregated hour in American society is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning.
But do you want them to let the blacks come into their church, or is it open for the blacks to come?
Well, it's not about letting them come in. It's why can't we worship together? If we say that we worship God, who is the Spirit of the truth, and you cannot see God.
But why not be worshiping together as a whole, not necessarily in the same building together, but as a whole, but in the mind, in the heart?
Yeah, but see, what you're saying is, you advocating segregation.
No, I'm not. I'm advocating worship.
You saying that people
worship
you want to worship with your own. Who is your own kind?
My own kind is my own color.
Well, let me tell you.
Put it that way.
Well, let me tell you what Jesus said.
My own color is my own kind.
Let me tell you what Jesus said when they came to Jesus.
Okay.
Jesus said, "Who is my sister? Who is my brother?
Right.
Who is my mother? Who is my father?" When they came to him and said, "Hey, man, your mother's out there. Want to see you." And Jesus said, "Well, who is my mother?" And you know what he said?
Those
who are willing to do what? The will of God.
The will of the Father.
Yeah.
And now you saying that the evangelicals are not doing the will of the Father, and those that are Baptists, Methodists, and all those other
but see, what is the will of God?
Are not doing the will of the Father.
But what is the will of God?
The will of God is that we all be as one. We all
the will of God is that we love one another as He has what?
Loved us.
The
point of it is that if we do love one another, then we ought to act and move and
if that's the case, then we ought to be able to worship the same living God.
Of course, I'm quite sure
we don't have to be separated and have black churches, white churches, and all this other kind of denominationalism stuff and all that.
That's all
that is separation in and of itself.
Well, all of the Catholics, the Baptists, the Methodists, the evangelicals, all of us have our own, the full gospel. All of us have our own way of serving God, worshiping Him in the congregation of the.
You're trying to make style God.
No, I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make the fact that we are, as people of God, children of the Lord, our God, we ought to be thinking, worshiping, doing the same as He would expect for us to do, require for us to do, I should say. Whether we are in church together on a Sunday morning, we ought to be doing the teaching of Him on every Sunday morning according to the Word of God. Now, if that is segregation, then that's not.
But that's not what we were talking about earlier.
But the segregation.
You said that you want to worship with your own
kind. I would prefer to worship with my own kind. I'm there.
What I'm trying to tell you,
I would prefer worshiping as a Baptist. I would prefer.
God says your own kind is those who love Him.
Of course, I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying too. I'm saying also that we not need to be in church with the whites, as the church. The whites don't have to be with us. The issue is that they have to start thinking like God.
Well,
because we think like God. Why don't they think like God?
Well, some of them probably do. I'm not going to say all white people don't think.
Well, like I'm talking about the evangelicals, especially because they are the.
But we know that some of them are not dealing with Christianity, they dealing with white privilege as religion.
But then if you look at this too, Doc, if blacks would go into a church, and that evangelical church, and decide they wanted to join, I don't think they would not take them in as members.
You don't think they would take them in?
I don't think they would not.
Oh yeah.
Not take them in as members.
Right.
I think they would accept them. But
Right.
the issue is that the separation is of the mind and the spirit of God. That's what I'm trying to get over. That it's of the mind and the spirit of God that they don't have as a church of Christ. All of us are part of Christ. All of us believe in Christ. All of us know that he crucified, died, and risen from the dead. But the other points are that are we going to start treating each other according to how he wants us to be treated, to treat one another? Man, it's love. It's just plain old love.
And that has nothing to do with skin tone.
No, of course not. Love doesn't have a thing to do with skin tone.
But unfortunately, you just got through saying,
I would prefer
the point that I had, tried to get you to understand is that God is no respecter of skin tone.
I understand that too.
And what God requires of you, me, regardless of our skin color, is he requires that we love him and that we love each other as we love ourselves, and we do unto others.
But do we have... I got you on that. But do we still have to go to their church, I should say gathering, do we still have to go to their gathering and worship?
Well, it's not their church. See, that's the
well, I'm
mistake
not. That's why.
See, the church is the church of Jesus Christ.
That's why
the church belongs to Jesus.
That's
Christ.
why I corrected it.
Right.
I said the gathering.
Right.
The congregational gathering that they have according to what they see, what God expects for them to do. And I'm saying the same thing is here with what God expects for us to do as Christians. I'm just saying segregation, being integrated with them won't change anything differently than what they're thinking now.
Maybe it might change something, because if we could worship together, maybe we can work together and we can play together and we can come together as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
But also, this, that when integration had started, it started with the schools at first. Children going to school together. Those children right now are grown, and they still separated. As you stated, it starts in the home, not necessarily in the church. You stated that before.
Well, the church begins in the home. See, that's what the problem is. See, you got to go to church.
You can't get a white child in my home, and I can't get a black child in their home.
See, you got to go to church before you come to church.
My point is, we need to just think about how we're going to live together, work together, and it all can be done only through the love of God and God's love in us.
Unless we can worship and serve one another in the Spirit of God, we're not going to ever come together. And that has to start with
Christ's return.
Your home.
It's going to start with Christ's return.
The family structure.
Yeah, I understand.
When you have the family structure gone awry, where you got a lot of children growing up in one-parent families, and you got a lot of children growing up in dysfunctional families, because
won't you say that's when the church comes in? That's when the church really comes in. Yeah. Is when we reach out to our children, teaching the children that the parents are not teaching, because it did happen when I was growing up, and a lot of black men weren't going to church. A lot of black men weren't even interested in God, tell the truth. And but the mother was, and the man was in the home, and the majority of the black men weren't in the church. It was the women that were carrying on the church, and of course the leader was a man, but the rest of the going of the church, the carrying on the church, the raising of the money, everything was the women, and they would bring their children. But we all gathered the children. They were gathered together. We all gathered together because of the way the women worked. Not necessarily. And you got to realize that it was one man, mostly maybe 2 or 3 other men who were deacons, and just to have a man to walk in the church and become a part of the congregation and give his life to God and Christ the way they ought to have didn't happen then. Why is it so hard now that we cannot do the same in the churches now and reach out to the parents that are single and have children? Why can't we reach out to them now and then bring those children into church? Why we can't do that like we used to do?
It goes back to what you were saying. It's the breakdown of the family. See, even
with the man now, he wasn't in church.
See, when you have the family is the beginning of society, and everything evolves from family. All of your other institutions, whether it's the economic institution, educational institution, political institution, or whatever, it all evolves out of family. And so when you have the family structure going awry, then what you have is societal chaos. And that's what we have today. We have societal chaos because you have too many children who are growing up in single-parent families without a father and a mother.
Well,
and you get that teaching and that learning, and that training is not taking place.
Well, we're gonna keep pushing on these issues until we come up with a good solution for what we have to do in regards to everything. But
God is the only answer.
God is the only answer. Tell the truth. And if you heard that echo, God is the only answer. We want you to understand that we are not here to persuade you to do anything. We're just speaking our opinion. We love you. God loves you. And you stay safe. Put the paper in your car. Keep it in your car.